please welcome President of Navajo Nation, Dr. Boo Nygren.
This is a nice microphone set. So yate to each and every one of you. Shein she Dr. Boo Nygren. Touchy yen slindo nats was able to see do todich in the seche. See yen kiddish. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to the board of directors for the RES conference, including fellow Navajo chairman, the chairman of the board, Derek Watchman, and the entire board and the distinguished staff. It's overwhelming to be at this conference every year to make sure that we're all here on one sole purpose: is how do we move Indian country forward together collectively? How can we bound together to make sure that our best interests are being heard as a whole? So again, thank you so much for putting on this wonderful conference year in, year out, and bringing all Indigenous leaders from everywhere, whether you're a business leader, whether you're a tribal leader, whether you're a government employee of a tribal nation. Again, thank you to the RES family. It's very much appreciative for everything that you do. So again, mentioned earlier, in Navajo, it's very traditional for each and every one of us to recognize where we come from, where our families have been in. I'm Tachitni, Red running into the Water People clan, born for South Vietnamese people. In Navajo, it's Nats Ozabasishin, Haro Todich Idni, which is Bitter Water People. And my paternal clans are South Vietnamese people as well. It's Nara Tsoze. And my wife is a former state representative for District 7 in the state of Arizona. She's also the First Lady of the Navajo Nation. She's barred in the state of Arizona as well. So again, she's a very strong woman that keeps me on the right path, and she's really quick to let me know when I'm steering off the wrong track. So again, thank you to all the women leaders in attendance as well, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a tribal chairwoman. Thank you for everything that you do and the being the core out of a lot of the things that we do. So yeah, and she's Hashlishni, which is the Mud People clan, born for Ashihin, the Salt People clan, and born for Noda Tachitni, and her paternal are Bitani people, which is the Folded People clans. Again, just very happy and humble to be here, to be among relatives who are enthusiastic, who are humble, to make sure that we are trying to build strong economies. That's one of the reasons why we came all the way this way. So if you've seen an SUV pull up in front of Caesars with mud and dust and all that stuff, that was the Navajo Nation president a few days ago. Because as we pulled up in front of Caesars, I think it was yesterday, and man, our vehicles are covered in dust and mud, and people were looking at us because everything was all the other vehicles were really nice and waxed except ours. So I stepped out of there. I was like, hey, yeah, yate. Right then and there, I ran into some Navajo people. So I was like, hey, yate. And it was exciting to step out of there. But I know that all of you have enjoyed some really good pieces of advice from Indian country, from leaders, from CEOs, from executives. Again, the sole purpose is how do we move collectively together, and how do we collectively inspire the next generation? One of the things I think about being a Navajo leader now, as the president of the Navajo Nation, going on 86 days. It's noon, so it's going on 87 days as the president. I think it's very important to remember where we come from. It's important that we continue to advocate and be champions, because you never know, one of your kids, one of your relatives who feels like they can't be a leader. It's totally possible, as long as we always continue to remember where we come from, who we represent. And I think I think there's hundreds of tribal nations that are represented at the RES conference year in, year out. It's always important to remember to encourage one another, encourage to support one another, because as a young tribal member on the Navajo Nation, I always remembered to look up to our leaders. One of the things that always inspired me with our leaders was Yego betzila the neck at yadash ke yego betzil not ani den long yego betzil and jgonago elcheda dilyal halet olan kaschindo halet ola nasko nani khatal khashet o an khinadet edol khashet o ai yise oret nen yego dankins on kichida des itole danzon sida kesa eye benye not ani benyendi shwat. So over a year ago, 1 year ago this month, or this week, 1 year ago this week, I announced my candidacy to run for Navajo Nation president. At the time, it was a very big, strenuous task because I've never been in politics. I've always been a working person. I've always been leaving a job as an executive for one of our tribal enterprises. It was a big gamble where I put all my chips on the table and I said, why not? Why not can the Navajo Nation have a business professional? Why not can a highly educated person lead the Navajo Nation? And why not be a 35-year-old seeking the office of the president? Beacons, out of 15 people running for president, I was the youngest. I was the youngest to run. I didn't talk too much about it, but now that I am the president, I can say, yes, I was the youngest to run for president of the Navajo Nation. And in the Navajo Nation presidential election, nearly 70,000, close to 70,000 Navajo registered people voted in that election. So it was a very, very big election in Indian country. I know that running for an election over 27,000 square miles of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah was a journey that I'll never forget. The reason why I took upon that journey is, how do I get my Navajo people out of poverty? That was always a goal of mine. One of the things I've said over the past year was I am anti-poverty. One of the best ways to help your community and your people is by ensuring that they have a job, ensuring that our tribal enterprises are fulfilling their duties, to make sure that they are bringing back the bacon home every single day, and that our tribal enterprises are making sure that they're using our own small businesses, tribal businesses, to be a part of it. So those are some of the things I thought about as I was preparing for today. And I know there's a lot of leaders here that are focused, because the more and more our tribal enterprises and the more our small businesses are successful, that helps us bring the basic needs to our community, because all of us represent communities that need broadband, electricity, water, the basic needs for all of our communities. The best way to do that is to make sure we keep our enterprises accountable, make sure they're bringing the bacon home, and at the same time making sure that they're working with small businesses in that case, because small businesses is what really brings communities together. So again, as president, going on 86, 87 days, that's one of my main missions, is to really help and improve the basic needs of our people in our community. Because even just yesterday, being able to FaceTime my daughter from home and on the reservation was one of those things where it wasn't possible just a few years ago. So I think that making sure that we continue to work together, continue to work with tribal leadership to make sure that we remove some of the red tape that we create internally. Because I know there's tribal leaders here represented here today. Sometimes we over-regulate, over-perfect some of the federal regulations that come down. And again, we got to make sure we bring some of those back to make sure that we are creating a business environment to where we can all be successful, and making sure that we're using a lot of the latest technologies that's accessible. Because I know this week, chatting with a lot of you this week was really encouraging to hear that some of you have so much that you're doing. I've met with some tribal leaders this week that are way ahead of the ball game, and I continue to ask you and to continue to guide myself as well to make sure that we're always in the spirit of collaboration, because end of the day, all of us represent Indian country. End of the day, all of us united. Thank you. Because end of the day, we represent Indian country. We represent the hundreds of thousands of young generations that are coming up. And how can we build tribal nations to where our kids want to come home? Our kids are thriving on our reservations, and no longer can they look to the outside communities, and we want our tribal nations to be the best place that they can live and continue to survive and have a good, healthy life. So that's one of the things I think about. And again, to bring my talk to a close, is let's continue to work with one another, continue to pray for one another, and continue to share some of our successes, because I know being president of a very large tribal nation, I'm always open to meeting even with our smallest tribal communities, because some of them are very innovative and creative. So with that being said, again, let's continue to help one another and make Indian country very proud. And let's continue to build nations within nations that are thriving and creating healthy and safe communities all across this country. So, na nishbikida no ingi khashet o in khashindon khastwidon khazani a hui jehon keda hat ingi yego bata hui liano le ko le naste njonogo the nedani lido le the nebitsen da estlij khajota ta hazian khajotan keden o eye benyete ingi a head and kedestis njonogo shi nasko nane katolet. With that being said, again, thank you for being courageous. Thank you for being leaders. Thank you for being Indian. Thank you for showing pride. I've seen so much jewelry this week. I've seen so much of the clothing and the rugs and the vendors and everything. It's just so good to be Indian, and it's so good to be here with you all. So let's continue to make ourselves good and continue to help each other and support each other. So with that being said, I want to conclude and say, God bless Indian country and God bless the United States of America. Yeah.